Inescapably foreign.
Welcome to another episode of Without Borders. I'm your host, Nolan Yuma. Today I'm here with Vida Razavi, who has lived in 6 different countries and 3 continents as a refugee, student, volunteer, freelancer, and researcher. So Vida, how are you doing today?
Hi, Nolan. Very excited to be on your show. Good. Today I feel quite upbeat because I took 7 hours of sleep last night. My newborn baby allowed us that much sleep after a long time. So yeah, today things are good.
All right. Oh, and then just so the listeners know, where are you right now?
I'm in a city called Antwerp or Antwerpen in Dutch, in Belgium, in the Flemish part of Belgium.
Okay. And you're speaking Flemish there.
Oh, yes. Well, you have to. um,
Well, I don't know, because I know some international companies you can get away with English, but...
well, that's a very actually nice topic to discuss the nuances there because, if I was an expat in Belgium, when I was a student even in Belgium, I didn't feel the need to learn Dutch, not at all. As I know lots of expats, they live here for 20 years and they even don't bother. But the moment that you become a refugee, you have kind of this social and official, of course, expectation for you to definitely learn the Dutch. And it's not bad at all. There are some nuances that I would like to address maybe sometime later. But the first 2 years I definitely had this mental resistance to learn Dutch. But then eventually it happened, and I'm happy that I learned it. It's another language. It's actually beautiful if you get to know the grammar in a sense that where the words coming from. And I have lots of friends that are into literature, and every time they say something like some words that are very nice to the ear, and it's good to know the meaning. It really makes me happy to know that I know this. So
Yeah, I understand, because there are some words in Flemish that you can't translate into English as well. But let's get into Belgium a little bit later. I think it'd be good to start closer to the beginning. And also just so listeners know, if you've listened to the show, or especially if you've read my writing, I can be quite politically correct and blunt with my opinions. Today, I won't be doing that on certain topics just because there are political sensitivities that I have to be aware of. And I just want the listeners to know that. But Vida, you came to Belgium in 2013, so we'll get there a little later. And you were born in 1983 in Mashhad, Iran, right?
correct.
Or Iran, maybe as the Americans would say.
Well, you can be American or English, and you can say either of those, Iran or Iran, as long as you don't confuse it with Iraq or Iraq. So
Yeah, so of course, I think most of the listeners on this show understand the differences, but of course there are many people, and even people who know the differences. Middle East kind of gets thrown around as a blanket term sometimes, even though there are so many rich cultural differences. And of course, there are big differences between Iran and Iraq, maybe in some cases politically not, but culturally. So I'm just curious what life was like in Mashhad, or maybe if you want to tell the listeners a little bit more about what makes Iran or Iran stand out from some of its surrounding countries.
interesting. Yes. So you can look at my life. The first 17 years in Mashhad. Mashhad is a eastern city in one of the eastern provinces in Iran. Iran, to just give you a mental image, is situated between, you have the Caspian Sea on the north and Persian Gulf on the south. And then on the west and east, we share borders with different countries, including Afghanistan and Pakistan, and then we have Iraq and Turkey and Azerbaijan on the west. So you can, yeah, I can tell you a lot about my first 17 years in Mashhad as a girl, as the fifth child from six children in a big family. But to just, make it short, I only remember noise and fights and chaos and um it, but that was very one dimensional life of me back then, because when I left Mashhad to university to study physics at the age of 18, uh, it was my conscious choice to be far from home, even though I could choose for a university which was in Mashhad and one of the good universities, but I wanted to go far. I wanted to get out of the house. And then actually I realized that, there are so many other dimensions to me. And I'm so happy for all those, being far from home. So I was never like this student who goes every month back home. And no, I would go back home for 2 times a year just, because I had to. It was summer vacation and it was too long. Or it was the new year. You had to be, with your parents.
It sounds like even before traveling to all these different countries you went, we were almost born a world citizen. Like you kind of just were born with this drive to explore the world. Is that true?
Somehow, unconsciously, yes. But the way that I look at it is because, one thing about, my big family, it came with lots of chaos and headaches, but few good things also came, which I'm very grateful for my parents for all those good things. Few things actually. And one of those was the fact that we had this big library at home, like the shelves full with full of books and from everywhere, like from literatures from west to east to history to romance and novels and poems and everything. And since I was that maybe geeky girl, one way for me to escape the chaos from my home at home, actually, it was to seek refuge in books. And I, from very very early on, I got to know to know the world beyond my home, my hometown, and my country. And one of the very, very influencing books that actually set the path for me to be here right now at this moment, and I'm very happy about it, was a book that my mom actually bought it for me. It was the biography of Albert Schweitzer. And Albert Schweitzer, with his mission to Africa, as a doctor, and leaving this missionary act, because back then many Western Europeans actually went back to Africa just for the missionary reasons, to spread, Christianity. But he decided at the age of early before 30, actually, he made a vow to himself, and he said, I'm going to study medicine, and I'm going back to Africa to help those people for real. So he did that. And he went, yeah, as a 13 years old, when you read that story, and I always
Just to provide some context for the listeners, because maybe not everyone knows who Albert Schweitzer is. So Albert Schweitzer, that you to describe some of his time in Africa, but he was a theologian, organist, writer, humanitarian, philosopher, and physician, a doctor. And just so people get an idea of the time period, I think it was 1952, he received the Nobel Peace Prize for his philosophy of a reverence for life. And I'm just wondering, I can describe what reference of life is, but was there any connection with the book that you read and reverence for life as well?
Not really. The only thing that I know that the lady who interviewed Albert Schweitzer at his quite late ages, actually, uh, uh, she had this book actually written for not for let's say it was a very simple narrative of what Albert Schweitzer achieved and what his mission was. So also maybe funny to mention that in 2000 wait 1333, 20 years later, by accident, I visited the hometown of Albert Schweitzer, the Kaisenberg, and on the way to the Alps, and I visited the museum house of him, and then there I could actually see all the works and all the the reference to life, all the how do you say the credentials that he got, and so there actually I came to know more about him. But as a 13 years old, that book gave me only this mental image that, oh, I want to go to Africa. And I'm not very proud of this. It's been some time that I haven't been proud of this, but back then I had this idea to save African kids. And I tell you maybe later why I'm not proud of this anymore. But, the seed was already planted in my head. I could imagine beyond my hometown. And that is the influence that, those books actually had on me. So in a sense, I wasn't born that way, but thanks to those books in our home, yeah.
Well, I'm really curious why you're not proud of it, because I'm thinking about his work and his philosophies around life. It's all around respecting everyone, and he talks a lot about how every living thing has a drive to keep on living, and that kind of connects us all in ways, and that we should all see each other as brothers and sisters, and care and respect for one another, which obviously in return made him one of the people back then who was very outspoken against colonialism. So a lot of positive things there, a lot of good reasons to motivate you to go to Africa. So what was it that you don't feel proud of now?
Well, we are getting into this quite early, but let's say, you see, so um, I need to give, there's a little bit of chronology in between. So I studied physics, and then when I finished my studies the last year, I decided, instead of going for a career in physics, I'm going to study sociology. I always found my passion and interest in that field, which actually made me face quite a resistance from my parents' side. In Iran, like in many Eastern societies, social sciences are not associated with high IQ, or in any, like lazy students go to social sciences. And I was a physics student, and physics is the top of the science. And for them, it was very difficult to give up that career and go to sociology. But I was very adamant about it. I proved them that I'm serious, because they really thought I'm not that serious about it. But then I remember myself telling myself that, Vida, I can have a career, I can earn an income in physics, of course, but my passion is in social sciences. And I have something to say in physics maybe in few years, but I have more to say in sociology. And that was my drive to really pursue my decision. And I have no no regrets whatsoever from that decision, even though it was not an easy path. But then, going back to Africa from that 13 years old, Nolan, it was forgotten. I never actually consciously was planning for going to Africa. And in 2008, I remember that I was working with a think tank, a European think tank, to somehow, or cover the chapter of human rights in Iran. And through this medium of internet and think tank and getting to know the opportunities, because I kept reading about these volunteers who go, American like fresh students, they go to Africa or Latin America to do some volunteer work. And up to that moment, I never planned, or I never even, I have forgotten about, my dream about going to Africa. But once this opportunity came, showed itself to me, and I was like, I, 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 I remember that I was not even sure. I just thought it's a, it's a shoot in the dark. But then when it got real and I could get this opportunity, I should explain that also, that it was, to become a volunteer in an orphanage house in Kenya, in Nairobi. Actually, there is this concept of Thomas Bernardo House. It's a very British concept of orphanages. Like, instead of just putting all the children together in a one big dorm, they build up cottages, like real houses, and they put 4, 5, 6 children together with one mama. This mama is also a staff of the orphanage, and so the children actually were sisters and brothers, and they had home. So when they go to school and they come back, to the campus, to that big campus, they go to their home, and the mama during the day cooks for them, wash their, do the laundry, and so it's a very home concept kind of orphanage. Anyway, I got the chance to do that, and I am. So that was my ticket to Africa, and I remember then I built up some networks. I could search for more jobs, and as a junior researcher, sociology was my field, and I got lucky. But then, why I'm not proud of that? Because the idea, just imagine how arrogant I was to think that I have this solution, or I have this tool that I can help, and I'm here to help people because they're not able to help themselves. It took me 4 years to realize that arrogance in me, because the Africa that I knew before I go there, it was just my, imagination, or my idea of Africa, and all the things that normally it's projected in media for it, it was very different from the Africa that I got to know, and all those people, brilliant, hardworking, and expert enough, like, because, Nolan, let's face it, let's just be honest with each other, that as a white person, and I'm not white, I'm yellow. I don't want to get into shadism, but it is true. I'm yellow. But in the context of Africa, I didn't deserve that prestige or privilege. There are many people who could do a better job than me, and And I
How
had
do you think
really,
this privilege you received, what was it from the organization that kind of put you on this pedestal because of the color of your skin or because of your educational background, or were it the people there that kind of put you in onto this pedestal?
well, it's interesting that you mentioned this, because then we can really explain it. Well, that indeed it was not the organization. You know, uh, being white, being bright, is associated with pureness, with knowledge, with being smart, being knowing, being ethical, even. So you somehow, in that context, you are immediately appreciated multiple times than the rest. And I had somehow ethical issue with that um, attitude, with that mentality. I'll give you another example. Like, I remember I traveled to India just as tourist, and in one of the tourist sites, I saw this family, and they wanted to take a picture with me. I was nobody. I was nobody, and that really made me sad. Just because of the color of skin, you are somehow becoming superior and desired, and I still have that issue with this mentality. And funny enough, so in Africa, when people meet me, like it's very interesting. When we start talking, first they take me as a Western, like American or European, and they ask me, where are you coming from? And I say, I'm from Iran. And without exception, without exception, every time that I mention my nationality, I immediately um, uh, noticed a change in the attitude. Yeah, because from the expectation that I was a Western American, and the privilege that I could own with that perception or the fact, actually, I am now no, you know
Yeah.
that is the annoying thing that really bothered me. Not because I was disappointed in their how they treated me afterwards, but that I found it's very sad that our societies, and I come from Iran, we lived with social status. We live with the fact that we are not a class society. I mean, class, like caste society, but our societies are very much classified in and hierarchical, in a sense that how you socially um, deserve treatments based on the social status that you have. And but these are maybe, the fact that I'm not proud of the fact that I was arrogant enough to think that I am the one who saves Africa. And then afterwards, I realized that, wow, these uh, locals, they know better things. They have this tacit knowledge of how to deal with. And nowadays, there are so many Africans who come to West. They get educated, they get all the technicalities and expertise, and they go back. We don't need yellows and whites, to come and, rescue or solve the problems.
Of
In that
course.
sense, yeah, I'm getting a bit further from
No, well, just to bring it
original.
back, because as you said, we kind of jumped ahead with the chronology here, but sometimes when we have certain themes, those themes don't sit in one time and place, right? We kind of have to jump around. But then just to bring it back a little bit with the idea of growing up in a society where there is a hierarchy. Of course, in Belgium, it exists much less than in Iran, right? Um, and how was it for you you said you were the fifth child?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you also fell somewhere on a hierarchy within your family.
Absolutely.
Right? So I'm a little bit curious about that because I'm sure a lot of Westerners, when they think about when you were born, it doesn't have as much of an effect on how you're raised. But in many countries, in Iran, in China as well, it really affects
You're
your
absolutely right.
role in the family and what you need to do. So I was kind of, what was your role as the fifth child?
Who? You need to see that in the light of, you're the fifth child, so you have four siblings older than you, and you're also a girl. So we were four girls and two boys, and uh, unfortunately, that division. Well, my brothers enjoyed much privilege and much freedom compared to us as girls, and that always bothered me too. Uh, and then you have, as a fifth child, I'm also into the psychology of number of children, because apparently it has big effect on your character and personality, which number you are in how many children. And I had this younger sister than me, 4 years. And when I look back, I realized that, yeah, I was this unseen, unheard child. Even though I should admit that because of my look and my good grades, and I was this good student, I was seen more than my other siblings in a sense.
Okay.
But I
But that
always
kind of
thought,
breaks the general norm behind that, though. Like, normally, would you be less seen as a fifth child in Iran?
absolutely, absolutely, you're a lost child. I mean, they say fifth child between six is a lost child anyway. So, so somehow I got found again, but in a sense, no, yeah, this you are lost in a family of eight, like you definitely, because your parents don't have the time or energy to even listen to you or to see you or notice you. It's just impossible, physically and mentally. So I was mostly in contact with let's say, my older sister, and she still has this mother kind of feeling towards me, because when she was 7, I was born. So when I was, I don't know, 4 or something, she was 11, and she was into this, mother role playing, like, playing house, with your real sister. And she still has that feeling towards me, and I think she expects some sort of loyalty from me, because back then she mothered me somehow.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think there are pros and cons when having a society that has more of a hierarchy, and then societies that have more equal. We can also look at power distance in these cases, right? In business structures, which cultures might have greater power distance and which have lesser power distance. Now, you've lived in so many countries, so you've obviously had to deal with these different ways of negotiating these different power distances. So I'm kind of wondering, from your experience, which countries had the largest power distance and which had the smallest? Because I know it can often lead to conflicts, right? For instance, if someone from a Scandinavian country or like Holland, where there is no power distance, right? Where you, the person who's several degrees down, can have a meeting with the CEO and email them directly, no problem, right? And that sounds all well and good, but then sometimes when these people from very like this equal or small power distance society go to work somewhere where there is more of a hierarchy, then those leaders might seem very incompetent because they're not showing that they're the leader, right? And then the people just feel like, okay, why isn't my boss telling me what to do? Why am I not getting clear instructions? Right. So there's a balance there. So what are some of your experiences?
That's absolutely true, Nolan. And I have experienced this, what you just mentioned. it's what I've experienced throughout these years, these disparities between I'm talking about the workspace because you gave an example about work, but that's true. To answer your first question, the least among the countries that I lived in, the least was for me indeed Belgium. Germany, I didn't have real working experience there. It was mostly entrepreneurial, so it's different from working for an organization. But Belgium definitely, although I should mention that you have always these outliers that so we are talking about average. We are talking about 68% of the population, which indeed in Belgium you don't have that. You can just call or address your boss with their first name, and it's perfectly fine. They actually prefer that way. You go to Africa, you go to Iran, and then address them with their first name, you will be doomed. I mean, they immediately get offended by that. And
Africa, many African countries, was it similar to in Iran with the power distance and hierarchy, or less?
Yes, because all of them are very masculine societies in a sense. And this masculinity actually brings its own power dynamic between, and at the same time, it's very respect-based society, where respect gets suddenly this very important value in the relationships, that I'm older than you, you need to respect me. I am a man, you need to respect me. So it can go in all directions. In Iran, hierarchy, because in Iran, you get treated based on the social status that you have. And it's just that you after some times, because you get treated very unfairly based on, if you're not rich, if you're not a doctor, if you're not someone important, then you start focusing on how you represent yourself to earn that good treatment. So you have normally in Eastern, in Iran, we have this, imagine a context that you inside your house can do something that outside is not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Inside your house, perfectly, you can, but outside you're not allowed. And then you start developing this distinction between, am I inside or am I outside? How should I represent my... So you get self-conscious when you are outside of the house.
So you have like an inside personality and an outside personality.
Absolutely. Like, it's like you have to be constantly cautious outside that, am I confirming what others expect me to be or to do? And that is tiring. That's really tiring. These things I realized when I was out of Iran, of course. When you're in the system, you somehow know it, but you're not aware of it. You're not conscious of it. So, but the moment that you take enough distance from that society, out of the system, that you're able to see the system. So, that was, especially in the reference to another culture, which is a bit, contrasting or different. But then, hierarchy, I experienced it in Africa a lot. I remember I was giving a workshop, and in that workshop there were men much older than me, women older than me, and I normally look much younger than my real age. On top of that, put me in a context where I'm a girl who is perceived as a little girl and standing in front of all these, men and much older than me. And I immediately noticed that they're not going to listen to me. It was a very obvious, legitimacy issue that you're not legitimate enough to stand here because you're much younger
And
than
was
me, you're
that
a
in
girl.
all the African countries? Because of course, I mean, Africa has the most languages out of any continent, right? And just so many rich cultures that are very distinct. So did you notice any differences with how the men were valued in society, or how the men treated you from the different countries that you lived in Africa?
Well, I should only talk about the African countries where I lived. It was mostly Eastern Africa, Kenya, Zambia, and Ethiopia. But I can say, in terms of how I was treated by, these gender roles, it's difficult, Nolan. You know why? Because at the same time, I had this layer on top of me as an expat with a brighter color, So it's difficult to really know that was it because of, if you get the same treatment as a girl with similar let's say situation. But there were moments that I definitely knew that is because, it was because I was a girl and I was young. So this concept of respect in our countries and in African countries where I experienced played a big role in relationships that you had with your coworkers or the people that you work with. I'm trying to think a bit harder and see if there was like I always
Did you feel like your experiences were quite similar in all three of those countries? When
in
it comes
terms
to
of
how you were treated as a woman?
yeah uh what comes to my mind is, maybe it's good for your listeners to know that I'm very much annoying in answering questions in a very straightforward way, because there's a context to it. This intersectionality of you, you have your gender, you have your social status, you have the color of your skin, you have your, which we say race, let's say here. You have your career, your work, the position you're standing. All these shape the expectations of people from me and their perception as well. And then in return, I get how they treat me. If there was an African girl, exactly the same as me, same education, same social class, same, but with a different shade of skin, would we be treated equally? That I doubt. We couldn't really do justice to the
Yeah,
answer.
I was just wondering about your personal experience. I just brought up being a woman because you were talking about that earlier. But now you bring up something interesting, and I've just noticed it so far in our conversation. You do provide a lot of context, which is also a cultural thing, right? I think a lot of Westerners, when they're talking to people from the East, they might be thinking, "Why aren't you getting to the point? Like this is not the question I asked." And then on the flip side, you have people from the East with Westerners, and they think these Westerners suck at listening. Why aren't they taking time to listen to the context? Because you can't understand the point without the context.
Wow.
How has that been for you in Belgium? Do you feel like people aren't listening to you sometimes when you have a presentation, or have you had to adapt your presentation style to get to the point quicker?
Wow. Ouch. Because that
No, no. I was like,
Pro-
I think it's
amazing.
good to provide context, right? It just
Amazing.
depends on the culture, and this is without borders, right? So I love to have people who, as a Westerner, I just get right to the point. And of course, there are variations in the West as well, right? Like I know in Germany, if you have a presentation, people expect a lot more about theory first and then the principles, whereas in America, it's like principles first and then theory. Right, so it's not just the West or the East. It can depend on each country. But I'm just wondering about your experience.
No, it's really amazing that how you put it that way, because I didn't know that's a thing. I really thought it's me with my very complicated and complex way of looking at things, but I didn't know there is a cultural factor in that. And
Yeah, definitely.
Very interesting. And I said, ouch. Why? Because it reminded me of all those moments that I was trying so hard during a workshop, for example, to just, get into the point with context. Because when you put people in the context, and my workshops also are not that, like pure technical or scientific. It's mostly about issues where not the, if you don't provide a nuanced answer, you could be easily wrong. So in that sense, when it's funny because multiple times I've explained, like I got a question from the crowd, and then I explained it for like 10 minutes, and then this guy stands up and says, yeah, but okay, you didn't answer my question. I was answering your questions, and just I have that issue at home too with my husband. My husband is Belgian, and it's really interesting. In the beginning, we end up just not having a conversation, just avoid the fact that when he asks me a question, I have to give all this background, and context, and he would get. I think he easily got bored with it and said, yeah, but you didn't answer my question. So it's I definitely need to look that up because I didn't know it's a cultural thing. But
I think it's always very important for people to be aware of it, because that's sometimes a problem in our world. People think like, okay, why isn't Vida getting to the point? And then they blame you as a person. But then once they understand, okay, no, it's a little bit more of a cultural thing, and you realize, okay, no, I'm the one who needs to be a better listener right now and take the time to understand the context rather than just like need to get the point right away. But then on the flip side, like someone from the East going to the West needs to realize, okay, I don't need all the context right now. I need to let this guy just say the main points and maybe later provide the context.
Yeah, exactly. I think as long as the communication is clear, there is no hard feelings because, who knows?
Now, I do think we have quite a bit of context now from some of your experiences. And you mentioned that when you were working as a freelancer in Kenya and Zambia and Ethiopia, that you were using the ICT4D methods, right? And I know these methods are to help bridge the digital divide, to help marginalized people in developing countries. Now, I know this is many years later after you were there, but I'm just wondering what your opinions are about like Elon Musk's Starlink. Do you think that's doing anything to bridge the divide, or is it just another business thing? Does it follow the ICT4D methods at all? Or like Elon Musk's Starlink or Mark Zuckerberg's plan to give free internet access to many countries that don't have access of it? This is definitely a, what's it called, freemium model or whatever, right? You get something for free, but then they take your data and sell it. So I'm just curious what
the
your
word for
opinions
it.
about all this.
All right, that's definitely interesting. Nolan, the value of ICT for development tools, from a very simple, not even a smartphone back then, because not everyone in Africa, I'm talking about. I should be careful because it's been since 2006 2016, I haven't been back. So I'm sure, like many other countries, African countries have been made progress in many senses. Back then, even a very dumb phone could do a lot to a family, in terms of their, let's say, the crops that they were going to have that year or the year later, or from even let's say this credit, like they could just send each other credit instead of carrying cash, which was very risky thing, and so many other examples. Um, I Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, this I'm very pessimist, and that's my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but I'm very pessimist to this capitalist models of aid, in a sense that they always start with something for your own benefit, for social and impact, social value and impact and blah blah blah. But at the end, you see that it's going to make the rich richer, and most of the issues that we are facing in our global society right now, they're actually it's because the rich got rich exploiting those countries at the first place. So in a sense, uh, ICT for 4D doesn't have to be these tools. They don't have to be very elaborated, very complicated tools, digital tools. No, simple things would do wonder. And I'm sure African people with their own tacit knowledge, they are best at exploiting and actually employing those tools, simple tools for their benefits. But I personally believe at this age, this era, internet should be a basic human right.
That's what Mark
Access
Zuckerberg
to internet.
says.
Well, yes, but yeah, it could be my bias, but something that comes, good things are said by so many people, but I always think twice if it comes from the mouth of a capitalist. And that's my personal, because, yeah, it should be the right. But I give you an anecdote. We have people, these field workers who come to the door, and they work for big humanitarian organizations, the international organizations, charity organizations, and they collect money. Okay, we are going to sponsor this packet of food for the babies in Africa, and it will save lives. And they want me as a middle class citizen to donate 15 euro per month to this organization. I have no objection to charity work and donations. There are a couple of these organizations who actually they do great work and they make impact. But then I questioned these field workers, because they are young and they're students, and they sometimes have no idea. They think they're doing great thing. I would say, how much in total yearly you need? And they say, yeah, only 30,000 euro. I said, you know what? Instead of just going door to door and facing all these people who tell you, no, I'm not interested, just go to 3 top men of your organization, and I'm not going to name them, and ask them for not even one full salary, just half of the monthly salary that they have it, believe me. So it's not about the money. And I know that getting engaged in charity work is a good thing for a citizen. It's, it's something that I advocate, but not every organization is up to the standards, first of all. And second of all, it's been very difficult to follow up on your money. And where does it go? How many % of the money that you donate, it really goes to that child, because we know, and that's another frustration that I had from my working in Africa, that I observed that how many expats live lavish lives, very, very, villas with pools, 2 cars, multiple travels, trips back to home, and blanco check just to furnish their houses. And
Yeah.
these were
And sometimes the
working with
people who live
charity.
like that, it's not just from charity or private organizations. It's also the flip side, like the people who, they're anti the capitalist organizations, and they're like, oh, I'm going to work for the government. But then the government does the exact same thing. And then they live with this government funding, and they also live in a nice house, 2 cars.
You know it. Yes. So you see, that's the thing. That's the frustration that I had. That okay, like development sector, in a sense, it was a big job market for Western people. And if you look at it, I mean, and okay, 50 years ago, maybe you could justify that with, saying that African people are not educated. But come on, I mean, 60, 70 years later, we know that, I mean, first of all, education is one aspect. Second of all, they are so competent, so highly qualified to take ownership of their own issues. Just leave the countries be, please. So in a sense, I'm very, very frustrated and disappointed in development sector, and that was the reason that I decided not to go back. And yeah.
Now, before we get to where you are now with your work, I am curious a little bit more about your immigration stories, because it's something that I always bring up on the show, because I hate bureaucracy, especially in the immigration. Of course, bureaucracy, I understand it. It's necessary, right? We do need this in our world. But I find the bureaucratic process so archaic, and every person I've had on the show, every person I meet, always has some story where it's just horrendous. And I don't know what it is about the immigration side of bureaucracy, but it seems to attract, I'll just be straight up, lazy, sadistic people. Now, if you're a bureaucrat listening to this, I am sorry. I'm sure there are many wonderful people out there as well. But on average, I have heard horror stories. And this needs to change. I mean, I can look at my phone and it knows where I'm born. It knows my heart rate. It knows every little thing about me. Yet for me to go to a different country, I have to get all these papers. I have to sign it in the right spot. If it's signed outside of the line, I get rejected. I have to wait another 6 months, pay even more money, and it's just hell to me, and it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, that's my little tangent.
I feel you, Nolan. Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you talk about, I have experienced so much power play when you go to an immigration office. I don't know what it is, but it's just you are in this position of, like you don't even dare to question a certain type of work or attitude, because you know that your papers in the hand of this person.
Not just your
And
papers, your life, right?
yeah, true. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it's true. But it's also, and at the same time, you know that if you want to play dirty, like you can easily bribe, and you get your file on top of the pile, and yeah. I mean, not in Europe, of course, but in other countries, it's very common. So you get outraged for being ethical and still being at the end of the line, because someone else could just bribe the officer with in the light of the day, not even so it's a mixed thing. My immigration, in Africa, for me as an expat, was very, I mean, the whole experience was great. I was really doing the work of my passion. A layer lower, I had this ethical and moral doubts and questions. Like, because the more that I saw things, the more pessimistic that I became, and then I started to question things. And the third layer was, as a sociologist, you always have these eyes which observe, this mind which is looking for the patterns. And African countries, they remind me a lot of Iran, that you had to play along any power play just to, get the work done. And I said, yeah, what's the point? I left that country, for that reason, and I'm experiencing it here again.
No,
in Belgium.
sometimes from my experience too, like with some of those developing nations, like I've only traveled, but I still needed a visa. And I know it's kind of bad to say, but the corruption can almost be a little bit more enjoyable in the bureaucratic process, because it's like, whoa, 20 euros and I can all of a sudden get my visa. Oh, 20 euros, I could pay off this cop and I can skip the line. This is awesome. I can't do this in Spain. I can't do this in Canada. In Canada, I'm forced to wait 6 months.
Yes. That you just said 20 years exactly. Like, I remember in Ethiopia, in the airport itself, I remember that if you paid $20, you could just go in another line, and it was faster. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, I didn't pull that number out of my ass.
No, seriously, that's just, and another, well, that's a $40 a story that I have, like, in the, well, that's another story, that at the national park in Nairobi, in Kenya, at the gate, we were offered $20 discount. So the ticket was $40. And we were offered that if you can pay $20, but no receipt. You receive no receipt. So in a sense, that $20 goes to the gate man, the ticket officer, and I save also $20. And either you pay $40 and you get the ticket, and the poor gate guy, the watchman or the ticket officer doesn't get any. So you suddenly face this ethical dilemma that, okay, do I pay? Okay, let's say saving $20 for you is not at all a question. You say, no, I don't mind $20, but then it's not about you saving $20, but you know that if you don't agree with the bribe, that officer is not going to get any money. And at the same time, this $40 goes to the Kenyan government, which is corrupt in a sense.
Yeah.
So you have to.
And then also, if everyone who can afford it does it, though, then the people who can't afford it keep getting pushed further and further back.
That's another, indeed. I didn't think of that layer. Yeah, but indeed, that's another also consideration, the ethical consideration that comes to mind. So what would you do? And so it's not always that straightforward to enjoy a kind of a corrupt situation, because then you have to really think hard and say, am I standing by my principle, or this poor guy, that $20 could be the education fee for, his son,
Yeah. Here, Vida, we're coming up on an hour now. I would love to keep talking. So we can end this episode here, because in the next episode, I want to start talking about another type of immigration process, because right now we're discussing, even though with corruption a little bit involved, we're discussing both our immigration experiences from kind of a privileged background, right? The fact that we can pay the $20. Also, just living as an expat in general has some privilege to it. So we're going to end the episode here. And then next week, I'll release the new one and we'll talk a little bit more about what it was like for you immigrating as a refugee, which of course was quite different. So remember, this was Without Borders. Please go to www.withoutborders.fyi to access the transcript. And please tune in next week.